Out of a Reddit question, I wanted to show how to create a cooldown with Weakauras, which also show you if the cooldown has a buff that activates, just like the Avenging Crusader. If I use Avenging Crusader, it shows the buff of 18 seconds of Avenging Crusader left, and also the option to remove the visibility of the Weakauras when you're not in combat and the buff is not active and the ability is not on cooldown. So that actually is relatively easy to do. You can edit the existing Weakauras, which is I'm gonna do with the Other Mastery because Avenging Crusader is off cooldown right now. You can go under conditions, and if you then do all of and then use the trigger 1 active forts, also trigger 2 on cooldown forts and in combat forts, then the and then the alpha to 0, then it's not shown. If I use now the aura mastery, it shows it in 6 seconds. If I remove the aura, it shows the cooldown. But like you just saw, when it's off cooldown, it will get invisible. How to do that? First of all, I will delete this because I don't need it, but if you do it, you do a new aura, you make a new aura, an icon, you go under trigger. First trigger will be the buff, so you use the name of the buff. You can, what I suggest is using exact spell IDs, but it's up to you which one you use. It works both ways. Now you put in the name of the spell ID of the buff, which is most times the same ID as the spell itself. So I'm gonna use the 31884 of Avenging Crusader. Then you create a new trigger. Oh, important is, in the buff one, you want to check the box of own only, and important is that's an aura found. Not always, this is important, although it's normally always like this when you create a new aura. The second trigger will be the cooldown, so you go under spell, then cooldown charges count. Here you type in the exact spell match. Here you can use just the name of the spell, so Avenging Wrath is it? Sorry that I said Avenging Crusader. It turns into the spell ID automatically. You can also type in the spell ID, it doesn't really matter. Here you want to check always. This is important as well. So now we kinda created this icon, which is not visible because we forgot one important thing, using here any trigger. Like you just saw, when it's on all triggers, it only shows when every trigger is active, so only when the buff is active. Now it shows. So what you want to do is also to check show cooldown. Typically stuff, it's normal. So now we can as well do here the same I did before. So you do all of, trigger 1 active false, trigger 2 on cooldown false, and in combat also false. Then alpha 0. Now it's not shown. When I use Avenging Crusader again, it shows the same. For everything, so it looks like this, you can just do whatever you want in this section of display. Just a shortly X course, you can, if you do zoom here, it shows the big icon and not this border from basic UI from Blizzard. This is how you create this aura. If you want to do a cooldown which has not a buff, like, I don't know, whatever you want, for example, Hammer of Justice, you just delete the buff part, so you only have one trigger, and obviously it changes to trigger 1 on cooldown false, and it's the same stuff. So if I do here and change the spell ID to the one of Hammer of Justice, so 853, it doesn't show, and when I'm using the spell, which I can't right now because nothing's in plain sight. If I use it, then it should show. Yeah, just like this. This is how you do it.